Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, watching News Night for the first time today here on Times Now World. Today, just 2 days before India casts its first ballot for the all-important truncated 7-phase election of 2019, there has been another stunning, sensational twist to the Rafale saga. A leading English newspaper in the country has published yet another investigative report and also claims that they have documents to support this particular report and evidence that the Prime Minister-led Cabinet Committee on Security gave quote-unquote unprecedented waivers to two French firms, namely Dassault Aviation and MMBDA. Also, what is startling in this particular report is where the newspaper and the author claims that the rules on arbitration and access to account books, as per India's defense procurement procedure, otherwise known as the DPP, were allegedly sidestepped to favor Dassault Aviation and MMBDA. Not only that, the report also alleges that the then Defence Minister, Manohar Parrikar, who's no more, he unfortunately passed away just last month, was quote-unquote uncomfortable with the deviations and sent it to the CCS, the Cabinet Committee on Security, for final approval, which came ultimately on the 24th of August 2016. But the fundamental question we'll be asking tonight to our guests and of course to the viewing public at large is whether or not these waivers made the contract in any way whatsoever non-transparent and against the interest of the country and by association of the armed forces. Joining me tonight for hopefully what is going to be a very calm and high on content and facts discussion is Tuhin Sinha, leader of the BJP and spokesperson, joining us from Mumbai. Also Ashutosh Mishra, political analyst, and our very own consulting editor Maruf Raza, consulting editor Times Now, also in the panel. Let me start with Maruf Raza if I could. The fundamental question, Mr. Raza, that not only is this newspaper report or the author asking, is also because whoever has read this must be asking today, are these quote-unquote exceptional waivers by what the Hindu newspaper claims the Prime Minister-led CCS gave to these two French firms, Dassault Aviation and MMBDA, in August 2016, while they allegedly exempted from aligning arbitration as far as Article 9 DPP 2013 is concerned on the offset deal? Are they fundamentally one, unprecedented, and also two, whether or not they went against the spirit as well as of the DPP and against the country by association? Would you say these new revelations or disclosures would give credence to that school of thought, Maruf?
Well, Athar, you know, there is a lot of stuff doing the rounds with regard to what all was done to get the Rafale deal going. But, you know, for me, there are central points that neither this newspaper report nor any earlier report has been able to question the quality of the aircraft or the requirement of that deeply needed by the Air Force to fulfill our military and strategic requirements. That the Air Force has agreed on and everybody else has agreed on. Now, I am given to understand that one of the motivations of Mr. Modi and his core team to speed up the deal was because the earlier arrangements that were being worked out with Dassault for the Rafale aircraft was taking so long and going nowhere that it had to be re-attended to and revisited. Now let me come to the DPP itself. You see, the DPP is a set of rules that we have formulated to ensure that in our country, middlemen and those so-called other shady characters that make up part of many a defense deal are kept out of it, but it hasn't really worked. Middlemen still find a way to get around it. And the second and most important thing is, the other countries from which you go out to do purchases do not necessarily regard your set of rules as completely applicable to them unless they sign a document confirming para chapter and verse of DPP.
You know, that's interesting, Maruf, because, you know, two things you said struck me.
Many of the defense deals which were done as part of government-to-government deal with the US I don't think any US company was
Understood.
equally happy with the DPP being imposed on them for the
here's the
offset
question, Maruf. I understand completely the first 2 points you made, and I must point out to our viewers as well that in this particular article that this author has written, he has categorically repeated what you just said, Maruf, that nowhere in a series of investigative reports that this particular individual or this particular newspaper has written about the Rafale deal, have they questioned, one, either the need for modernizing the Indian armed services, including the Air Force, or the quality of the Rafale aircraft, or the dire need to make sure that inventory is augmented. He's made that very clear. The second point, Maruf, and I want to ask Tuhin Sinha this as well, because the newspaper report alleges that the then Defence Minister, the late Mr. Manohar Parrikar, was uncomfortable with deviations. And as Maruf said, you know, the fact that the DPP is a set of rules, the government trying to facilitate really a far more smoother transaction or far quicker transaction, you know, is kind of within its rights to look at how it can be somehow expedited. But the question still remains that the offset obligations of 30,000 rupees are heavily backloaded in final contract. The obligations to be discharged over 7 years are with 0% discharge for the first 3 years. The INT, the Indian negotiating team's efforts on offset issues, claims this newspaper report, Tuhin, allegedly was weakened by parallel negotiations which were led not only allegedly, if you go by the newspaper report, by PMO officials, high-ranking ones, and the NSA, Mr. Doval himself. This is all reported by The Hindu in the latest report as well. They also claim, since it is public knowledge and common knowledge to him, that the intergovernmental agreement and the offset contract signed by the two, Dassault as well as the offset partners, were not part of each other. The IGA was separate and the offset contract, although signed on the same exact date in September 16, were not part of each other. Does that not raise questions about unprecedented waivers which perhaps the government gave these two individuals or companies with a questionable motive? How would you respond to that, Mr. Sinha?
Well, Athar, so far as the government is concerned, the fresh allegations which the ilk of the Hindu keep raising from time to time amount to flogging a dead horse. It's shifting goalpost all the same. If you just look at it, you know, whatever allegations come forth, they are part of the regular negotiations. They are inconsequential to the final deal. Let me just reiterate the three important issues which were relevant when you know the allegations first came out, which was why 126, why not why 36, why not 126, why Anil Ambani as an offset partner, and why, you know, on the pricing. All of these three have been satisfactorily answered from time to time, even in Parliament. Even the Supreme Court refused to get into the pricing details. Now, add to that,
here I'll stop
you know, I just want to ask the people who brought
on that point of the Supreme Court, I'll ask you another question, because today's report suggests that the fact that these two offset contracts that were signed, and with these unprecedented waivers, never before being given to any foreign manufacturer before, were not mentioned by the government in its affidavit to the Supreme Court. The fact that these two offset contracts did not, the mention of waivers of this kind, of Article 12 or 9 not being aligned with Article 21 of the DPP, was not mentioned by the government. What was the need to keep it out then from the affidavit in the Supreme Court is the question.
See, let's get this clear. Athar, let's get this clear. Let's get this clear, the amount of time which had been wasted by the UPA in getting a deal. We have followed an unconventional process, but at the same time, the changes are inconsequential to the final deal. As I, brought you back to the core issues have been taken care of. These are part of the negotiations. If you really go into the way UPA doled out offset contracts to friends and relatives who overnight turned their interest into the defense sector, there is no comparison. What I can assure you is that this was part of the negotiating process which happens on any deal, and this doesn't affect the outcome of the deal.
But there's no
and that is why the
concern on the part of the BJP or the government
that
this might look like
in the court.
But Tuhin, there's no concern on the part of the government really, which ultimately, in fact, as the newspaper report claims, ignored and denied singular access to the negotiation team to raise this issue of unprecedented waivers, either the CCS or with the Prime Minister or anyone else, because they were undercut or undermined by parallel negotiations that the PMO officials allegedly were carrying out along with the NSA, Mr. Doval. Does that not concern you, the perception that a legitimate query, a legitimate point of order to be that was being sought to raise by the INT officials was not given any sort of valve there? No hearing for them.
Come in.
See, this entire theory of parallel negotiations is latent with a mischievous intent.
Okay.
And I don't, fair enough, even if they brought out the allegations to hint at parallel negotiations and to hint at a person who's no more, the former defense minister, not being in agreement with the Prime Minister, reeks of absolute malified and obnoxious intent, and it doesn't even deserve
on the part of the newspaper you're saying? On the part of the newspaper you're saying?
May I?
Yes, to hint at two parallel power, negotiating centers, and the fact that the defense minister was not in agreement with the Prime Minister is purely a matter of conjecture.
All right. Okay, fair enough. Now that's a fair enough description really of the government or the party really feels.
It reeks of obnoxious intent.
Okay, Ashutosh Mishra, I want to ask you this: are you satisfied with the answers given right now by the BJP spokesperson, and also do you think that this particular question has been answered? And what is the question, Mr. Ashutosh Mishra? The question is: did parallel parlays, which Tuhin Sinha calls mischievous sort of hints or insinuations against individuals in the government or otherwise, did they undermine negotiations with the INT, the Indian negotiation team? That's number one. Number two, were waivers in the offset contract disclosed by the submission in the SC? The answer clearly is no. Since IGA and offset contracts are separate, why give the same waivers? And do you believe, this is the most important questions then, Ashutosh Mishra, were the interests of India and Indian forces undermined by giving these waivers?
Yes, the interests of Indian forces were undermined, not only by giving this waiver, but also by not insisting on transfer of technology. In the latest skirmish that happened where our Abhinandan shot down F-16, it was a MiG-21 upgraded by HAL. So having technology is very important for India. Now, can I continue?
Yes, please, quickly,
now,
sir.
Maruf was talking about Maruf was
just
talking
quickly,
about
that's
why
factually incorrect.
These were
I'll come back to you to
irrelevant or less important, so that middlemen could be thrown out. Now, in this particular case, Rahul Gandhi and the opposition is insisting that Chaukidar Chor hai. That he's the middleman. And how is that money coming?
I want to take a break, but I also want to tell you, sir, that political rhetoric perhaps is way too common today in television debates. I am trying and striving to keep political rhetoric out of this debate. Let's just talk on facts, what the newspaper claims, because they've also claimed they have the evidence to support it, and the documents are with the Hindu newspaper. Now, going back to facts, and I have to take a very short break at this moment, sir, and I want to go back to Maruf and Tuhin as well on this. Answer one question quickly before I take a break, Mr. Ashutosh Mishra. Do you believe that these exemptions or unprecedented waivers somewhere are enough to try and put the government on the mat about some sort of underhand dealing or whatever you want to call it in the entire Rafale dealing agreement? Yes or no?
This is just one of the things that will help nail the government.
Okay.
And Mr. Modi, that's why, is under pressure.
Okay.
Just let me complete. Election Commission has given an affidavit about electoral bonds and how foreign funding can come in and how it will remain anonymous. So it will be harder to find the money trail later also.
Okay, now I want to go back to the article and what it claims and as well as the Rafale deal and plus, of course, the government's defense on this. But first, we have to take a very short break right now. When we come back, we'll get you reactions of the day on the report and the news story, and we'll continue our discussion with Maruf, Tuhin and Ashutosh. Please stay with us. You're back with Times Now World. This is News Night, and we'll go back to our guests in just a bit. We're discussing the explosive report today in a leading Hindu the newspaper called The Hindu, where they are alleging that unprecedented waivers were given to the foreign manufacturers Dassault and Company, as well as MMBDA, which are not only unprecedented but somehow undermined or undercut the Indian negotiating team or the INT and their reservations about the waivers. Now, before I go back to Maruf on this, I'd like our viewers to see two reactions, both from opposition leaders. One is Pawan Khera of the Congress Party, the other is Majid Memon of the NCP. This is what they had to say after the news report became public.
Dassault, the Prime Minister was extra gracious and kind to Dassault by waiving bank guarantee, which is substantial money and which is to be added to the price. So if you are waiving bank guarantee, risking the whole transaction only to show that you have spent less money, you see, is again a fraud. So all these things are going to come up in Parliament in one day or the other when the 17th Lok Sabha convenes. And I think Rafale is not going to spare the Prime Minister. The Rafale ghost will continue to be chasing him, whether he is the Prime Minister or not hereafter.
बार बार आईएनटी लिख लिख कर कह रही है कि भाई हमारे प्रयासों को कमजोर किया जा रहा है, प्रधानमंत्री कार्यालय द्वारा कमजोर किया जा रहा है, अजीत डोवल द्वारा कमजोर किया जा रहा है, बार बार कह रही है, फिर भी नजरअंदाज हो रहा। बड़ा महत्वपूर्ण चीज है कि जो ऑफसेट का काम है वो 7वें साल में 88% होगा, बाकी जो 12% है वो अब से लेकर 6 साल तक सिर्फ 12% होगा। आपने अनिल अंबानी को पूरा समय दे रहे थे आप कि अंत में जाकर आप करिएगा, आखिर क्यों?
Again, that's the political rhetoric I was talking about. This is a political attack on the Prime Minister and this incumbent current government. I'm not as interested in the political attack, but in what the newspaper has written, because they claim that they have seen documents to prove it. Maruf Raza, my question to you is twofold. Number one, first of all, I agree with you completely and unequivocally that there can be no two ways or not even a debate about the fact that India needs to upgrade its inventory as far as our armed forces are concerned. The Rafale aircraft quality is not being discussed or debated here. They are the next generation best aircraft, one of the best, of course, along with the Eurofighter Typhoon as well. I'm not even concerned about that. 2 points I want to highlight to you, Maruf, from the report. Allegedly, the report claims that these two were exempted from aligning arbitration. I mentioned this before, Article 9 DPP 2013 in the offset deal. Also, they were exempt from access to books accounts. This is Article 12 of the DPP 2013. And lastly, Maruf, because this is again what the newspaper is claiming, the DAC, the Defence Acquisition Council, allegedly dropped the provision of penalty for use of agents, quote unquote, or undue influence, quote unquote. Somebody mentioned about middlemen and you know, all kinds of shady characters. I think it was you who mentioned it. If somebody at the Defence Acquisition Council, Maruf, is allegedly dropping these provisions where these characters, shady characters, by definition, who use undue influence or use of agents, wouldn't that raise suspicion, to say the least, Maruf?
See, Athar, you know, there are 3 or 4 issues that I want to comment on. The first is, before I go on to your question, let me address the issue about national security and the purchase of these aircrafts. It's a simple logical question. Do we benefit in terms of our security upgrades by having the aircraft in our inventory as soon as possible? As we saw, we used a 1960s vintage MiG against the upgraded and advanced versions of F-16, and we saw the results of that. And the world was pretty shocked that we still use those aircrafts. So we really needed to upgrade. And the quickest you can do it is by getting these aircrafts into the Indian inventory as soon as possible.
Understood.
Now, if you go by the processes of the defense procurement process, which in the case of the Rafale deal started between 2001-2003 and dragged on till 2013-14, and then the file was closed because of a variety of reasons that the UPA government was not comfortable without the deal being given a part of sweeteners to the HAL, which the Air Force, to put it mildly, is terribly unhappy with their performance.
Understood,
to
Maru.
manufacture
But what about
anything
these 2
worthwhile.
points about
So
access
now
to
we come
books
the
account being
offsets
exempt?
issue.
Also the fact
Now,
that DAC allegedly...
please let me make my point.
No, but you know, we've all seen you speak about Rafale and how it really started from 2001.
Now,
the question today is limited to whether the DAC allegedly dropped these 2 provisions: 1 of use of agents and 2 of undue influence. Does that not worry you?
I am trying to address.
Yes,
see, let me answer the question.
Sure.
You know, 2 other speakers have talked about whether it is, you know, your national security is being affected by a delayed process
or
by a quick process. I'm trying to tell you what is in national security's interest. Now, when we come on to the offset, please understand that it is being given in this deal to at least 4 companies and not just to the Dassault and the Ambani link that is being highlighted. Ambani, apparently, as per a report in the Economic Times ET Bureau by Manipubi, has said very clearly that only 3% of the total 30,000 crores worth would go to the Ambani outfit, and that translates to less than 1,000 crores. And the Rafale CEO has said 850 crores. There are other companies that are in the link also. It is Dassault, it is Safran, it is MBDA for radars, etc. And there's a 4th company I can't remember. So basically, the deal has to be done between many other players here. Thirdly, all the other deals, why don't we investigate for a change that the deals we did with the Americans over $15 billion with all FMS deals, were they also implemented para chapter and verse as per our DPP, or only the para chapter and verse of the DPP would apply to the Dassault deal? And finally, and most importantly, I think where Mr. Modi trapped himself, that he got into the details of the mechanics, which he should have let the officials handle. You know, I thought that was something, as Prime Minister, he could have given a sweeping judgment and got on with it, instead of getting into the details in which complicated matters.
You're saying at the worst, one can imagine that the Prime Minister
was being brought out by one of the speakers, which is probably haunted.
If I understand you correctly, Maruf, if I understand Maruf correctly, he's saying that yes, the Prime Minister is a man who likes to know exactly how the work is getting done. Micromanaging is not a crime really, and perhaps, as Maruf used, he trapped himself micromanaging. That's certainly not a crime to him.
Well, you know, if you ask me what the opposition and what people like Enram are doing, they're punishing the Prime Minister for being hands-on. They're punishing him for being proactive. That's about the only fault that I can see. Anyway, let me just make a few quick points. See, first of all, I heard one of your panelists say that there is no technology of transfer, which again shows how uninformed people are. 30% of the total offsets are allocated for technology transfer to DRDO, which is the highest you could ever expect. Secondly, let us for a moment assume, let us for the sake of argument assume that, you know, the allegations, the fresh allegations which have been made by Hindu are true. And this may have resulted in some amount of escalation in the total price of the deal. Again, can you establish that there was a direct link to benefit somebody either in government or in the private sector?
Answer that,
or
Mr. Mishra.
It was done purely to expedite the whole process and make sure that it happened.
In less than 30 seconds or 45 seconds at the most.
Today,
answer that, Mr. Mishra.
So sadly, what has happened today is that the entire allegations have been reduced to
Let him answer. Let him answer.
So before I answer that, Maruf was talking about national security being a reason. We are not going to get too many Rafales, only 18, and Maruf can correct me if I am wrong. Now Indian Air Force is saying let's buy some MiG-29s. So this image that is trying to be created, this picture that is being created, that it is all about national security.
Answer to his question. We have very little time here, Ashutosh. Answer to his question.
Than buying Rafale
answer his question.
And that will be what he is saying. Papers are missing. Why has the government given a false affidavit, incomplete affidavit with a typo in Supreme Court? And when there is a JPC, this will be proved. And as I said, that now electoral bonds and foreign funding are nameless. So if something happens, we will getting this money trail as can be done when it is direct, when this foreign funding and electoral bonds were
so
not
the
there,
way I see
will be
it,
hard. But yes, I am sure if there is a JPC,
Ashutosh, the way I see it, because it's because we've had a largely informative discussions, we've been informed really of the BJP's position on this, of independent analysts like Maruf, who of course also have said perhaps the Prime Minister at the very least trapped himself in micromanaging, nothing else. That's what he suggested. Ashutosh Mishra of course has a completely different take
Maruf
on it. So does the opposition, so does the Hindu. But right now we'll take another short break and tell you, and with the promise that Newsnight will return every day at the same time with this informative, innovative discussion format where there is less shouting and more exchange of views for the time being with the top story of the day. I've been Athar Khan. Thank you for watching Newsnight.